Bright Duty. Every student matters.
So the next is the Peninsula Plateau. So before this, we had already looked at the three main features of India. The first one was the mountains, the second one the northern plains, and the third the Thar Desert. Now next we come to look at the peninsular part, and we already know what a peninsula is. A peninsula is a body of land or a mass of land where the water surrounds on its three sides. Okay, so we know that the southern part of India has a triangular shape, and on three of its sides it is surrounded by water. On the east we have Bay of Bengal, on the west we have Arabian Sea, and south we have the Indian Ocean. That is why we called this portion of the land as peninsular. But not only it is a peninsula, but it also forms a unique kind of a landscape which is called plateau. Okay, so plateaus are those landscapes which look like a tabletop. Okay, they are not conical like mountains. Mountains are conical, but the plateaus are like tabletops. Okay, they are flat at the top. They are not conical. They are not angular. The mountains, the Himalayas, they are conical. They are pointed towards the top, but the plateaus have flat surface on its top. Now this Peninsula Plateau, as we have already said that it lies after the Great Northern Plains. So the Peninsula Plateau is separated from the Indo-Gangetic Plain or the Great Northern Plains, as we have studied in this lesson. The fertile northern plains, right? Now this Peninsula Plateau has many hills, okay, and these hills are not as high as the Himalayas, okay, they are not that high, but they are hills, and they also have tableland. The land formation here looks like a table. Okay, so you go straight and then suddenly you see the rise of the landmass, and again flat at the top, and then again slopes and goes decreases the height of it. Okay, so these kind of land formations along with many small hills can be seen in the peninsular part of our country. Now this Peninsula Plateau, the region of Peninsula Plateau, is quite rocky and uneven. Okay, we know what rocky means. Lot of rocky rocks or pebbles on the surface of the land. Okay, and it is also uneven, meaning that it does not look as if the land mass is smooth. There is unevenness. Okay, there is a plain and suddenly there is a rise of a small hill, flat at the top, slope, again plain, again rise, again a flat top, so the landscape is uneven. And this Peninsula Plateau extends far south from the Indo-Gangetic Plain to the far south. And at the south we know there is the state of Kerala, and Kanyakumari is the tip, okay, of the southern part of the mainland India. Now the northwestern part of the peninsular plateau of India, there is lava flows. Okay, the kind of the landmass present there in the northwestern part of the Peninsula Plateau is formed as a result of the lava flows. Okay, at some point there were volcanic eruptions, and because of that volcanic eruptions there were lava flows, and the flows of that lava settled there, and thus the landscape was formed. That is the northwestern part of the Peninsula Plateau. Now it also has a unique feature called the Deccan Traps. Okay, this feature is only seen in the Peninsula Plateau of the entire country. It is not found in the Himalayas, it is not found in the Thar Desert, it is not found in the plains, the northern plains, but only in the peninsular Plateau, and these Deccan Traps are the names given to a kind of a landmass which looks like giant staircases. We know the staircases, right? Now the giant staircases, these Deccan Traps are giant staircases. They're huge tableland formations of these landscapes, and they look like staircases but in giant forms. Okay, and these formations of landscapes are called Deccan Traps. Okay. Now, as I've already said, that the Peninsula Plateau of the Indian subcontinent is triangular in shape. It is triangular in shape. Okay, and this entire Peninsular Plateau is divided into two different regions. The first one is the Deccan Plateau, and the second one is the Central Highlands. Okay. Now, this entire region of the Peninsula Plateau has its base. The base meaning the end of that particular feature. Okay. Like for example, a mountain. When we say a mountain base, that means this is the base of the mountain, and this is the highest point is called the apex. The top of it is called apex, and the bottom of it is called base. So if you look at this triangular landmass which is called the Peninsular Plateau, it looks like an inverted shape of a mountain, of a triangular. So this here is the base, and this here is the apex or the top of it. Okay, so as you can see, the base is towards the northern plains and the apex is towards the Kanyakumari, the southern tip of mainland India. Okay, so the base of the Peninsula Plateau of India, it has Delhi Ridge and Rajmahal Hills. These are ranges of hills. Just like mountain ranges, these are also ranges of hills, and at the apex we have Kanyakumari. Okay, at the apex of the Peninsular Plateau. Now, when we started looking at the plateau, the Peninsula Plateau, I mentioned that there are hills, smaller hills, not as high, not as tall as the Himalayas, but there are hills, and there are also tabletop kind of landscapes here. Okay, now the height of these hills and these plateaus, they are between 600 to 900 meters, so they are not so high. Okay, and the region has a slope. Okay, it is not flat, it slopes on some sides of the entire region. So the northern part slopes towards the north and east. So if this is the region of Peninsula Plateau, then the northern part, this whole northern part slopes towards the north and then towards the east. So this is the side where it slopes. That means it suddenly starts to fall towards that direction. Okay, the land which was running flat suddenly starts to gradually, slowly slope or tilt towards the north and the east. Okay, so as a result of that, what happens? The rivers that flow in this region, they also then flow towards the sloped area. Okay, and we can see that many of the rivers flowing in this part of the plateau, they flow along the slopes and drain into the Bay of Bengal. Okay, if the land is sloped towards the western side, then we see that the rivers which flow through this region will automatically drain into the Arabian Sea. Okay, and when it is sloped towards the east, then the rivers flowing will drain into the Bay of Bengal. Alright. So the rivers Chambal, Son and Damodar, they drain towards the north and east of the Peninsula Plateau according to the slope of the region. Okay. So that was the northern parts sloping. Now when you look at the east and the southeast sloping, then the south and southeast sloping happens in the south of Satrupa Maikal ranges. Okay, these are also hilly ranges. And the east and the southeast sloping. So east is this one, east, and southeast is this region. So here again there is another sloping. So one was north and east, the other is east and southeast. So again the rivers will again flow along the sloped areas. Okay, so as a result of this, rivers drain into northwestern part. As we mentioned that the Peninsula Plateau is divided into two parts. The first one was the Deccan Plateau and the second one Central Highlands, right? So we will look at the Deccan Plateau now. Now the Deccan Plateau has a southward extension, meaning the Peninsula Plateau of India is divided into Deccan Plateau and Central Highlands. So the northern part of this Peninsula Plateau is called Central Highlands and the southern one is called Deccan Plateau. So it extends towards the south. It stretches towards the south, and towards the south there are some hilly ranges, and those are called Satrupa, Mahadev and Maikal ranges. Okay. The northwestern part of this Deccan Plateau, the north, if this is north, then northwestern is this part. Okay. So the northwestern part is formed by lava flows. Alright, there used to be some active volcanoes in that area at some point in time, and as a result of the volcanic eruptions, the lava that flew out of those volcanic mountains, the lava settled and they made formations, land formations, and that resulted in the formation of the northwestern part of the Deccan Plateau. On its west, this is the west. On its west, it is bounded by Western Ghats. Okay. Now, these Western Ghats have different names in different states of our country. They are called with local names. Of course, they are also known as Western Ghats, popularly known as Western Ghats, mostly when we refer to it in English. Okay, but it also has local names, the names which the people living in that respective area, the local areas, use it. For example, it is called Cardamom and Anaimalai Hills in Kerala. So this is the local name given by the people in Kerala. In Tamil Nadu, it is called Nilgiri. Okay. And in Maharashtra and Karnataka, it is known as Sayadri. Okay, so as you can see, there are three different local names for Western Ghats. Now this Western Ghat or the Deccan Plateau, they have higher elevation, or the height of that plateau is higher in the southern parts. As you go further south, then the height of that tableland and the hills, it gets higher. Okay, but the height of it is between 900 to 1100 meters. So it is not as high as what we learnt about in the Himalayas, in the Himalayan ranges, the mountains in the Himalayan ranges. So that was the western boundary of the plateau, Deccan Plateau. Now it also is bounded on the east by Eastern Ghats. So that's why we call it western, because the western boundary. And in the east, we have Eastern Ghats. Okay, so they are bounded both on the east and the west by Eastern Ghats and Western Ghats. Now in the Eastern Ghats, the hills there, they're also not that tall. They're less than 900 meters, even shorter height than what it is in the Western Ghats. Okay. Now the slope of the Deccan Plateau is towards the southeast and east. So if this is the Deccan Plateau, then the slope is south, south and southeast. So this is where it has its slope. So that is why all the rivers flow along this slope except the rivers Tapti and Narmada. They flow on the opposite side of the slope. Okay. Now let us look at another feature of the peninsular plateau, that is the Central Highlands. Okay. As you can see that this is the northern part of the Peninsular Plateau, because the southern part is the Deccan Plateau and the Central Highlands is in the northern part. Okay. Now this area, this region of Central Highlands has plateaus, denuded mountain ranges, meaning they're not snow-capped or they're not covered in vegetation or trees. They're denuded. They're just dry. They look a mountain or hill of mud. Okay, and they have low hills. Now the rocks which form the plateaus, the mountains and the hills here, that the kind of a rock that forms these kind of landscapes are igneous rocks. Okay, igneous rocks. Now the Central Highlands are also bounded on its sides by various ranges. Okay, in the northwest, so if this is the Central Highlands, this is northwest. In the northwest, it has Aravalli ranges. Aravalli ranges in the northwest. Okay. Now this Aravalli ranges is part of the fold mountains. Now if you remember, in the last class we had this discussion about fold mountains, where I told you that the Himalayan range is the youngest fold mountains in the world. How the Himalayan range was formed was because of the plate tectonic slides or compression, as a result of which folding like structures were formed. Some ripple like structures were formed, and the mountains formed as a result of such compression is called fold mountains. Right? Now this Aravalli range was also part of that fold mountains in the Himalayan range. Okay. Now this Central Highlands, they run from Gujarat to Delhi. The Aravalli ranges which bounds the northwestern part of the Central Highlands, they run from Gujarat in the west to Delhi in the south. So it covers that entire region from Gujarat to Delhi. Okay. In the south of the Central Highlands is another range which is called Vindhya range. Okay. And in the eastern extension there is Kaimur hills. So as you can see that there are different kinds of ranges of hills which are acting as boundaries to the Central Highlands. Okay. Now between the Aravalli in the northwest and the Vindhya ranges in the south, there is another kind of land formation which is a plateau, and this plateau is called Malwa Plateau, and this is also located in the Central Highlands. Okay. Now two of the main rivers of this region is Chambal and Betwa rivers. Alright. The eastern part of the Central Highlands is called Bundelkhand. Okay, this is a very old name given to this region, given to this part of the region. And which part? The eastern part. Okay, not the whole of the Central Highlands is called Bundelkhand, but the eastern part of it is still called Bundelkhand. Now the Central Highlands also have its extension towards the east it continues to extend in the east, and that extension is called Shillong Plateau. Okay, so the Peninsula Plateau or the Central Highlands continues to extend towards the east towards Shillong, and that extension or that plateau is called Shillong Plateau. So that was the Peninsula Plateau, which forms the southern portion of our of India. Okay, the next comes the coastal plains. So with the name itself, we can get an idea that these are the plains which are formed along the coast, right? Now coasts are those areas which are the banks of the water bodies. The water bodies here meaning Bay of Bengal, Arabian Sea. These are two water bodies which lie on the eastern side and the western side of the peninsular part of the country. Okay, and then these are bounded by coasts, and these coasts are called coastal plains. So these coastal plains stretches from Orissa in the east to Gujarat in the west. So if you remember, if this is the map of the peninsular part of India, then we said that the coastal plains lie along the two water bodies. This is the Bay of Bengal and this here is Arabian Sea. And the coastal plains lie along these two water bodies. Orissa is here and this is the state of Gujarat. So the coastal plains, they stretch from Orissa in the east all along the peninsular part of the country to Gujarat in the west. So it forms the eastern coastal plains and the western coastal plains. Now let us look at the western coast. Now first let us look at the western coastal plain. So let us look at the western coastal plain, which means we are looking at the western side of the peninsular part of India. Now the western coastal plain stretches from Kerala in the south to Gujarat in the north. So this entire stretch of plain along the coast of Arabian Sea is called western coastal plain. Now this coastal plain is narrow compared to the eastern coastal plain. Okay. Now this western coastal plain is again divided into two. The first one is called Konkan Coast, which is in the northern part of the entire western coastal plain, and the Malabar coast is the second half of that coast, which lies to the southern part of that western coastal plain. Now this western coastal plains have various features. The first one is called estuaries. Okay, estuaries are drowned valleys. Drowned meaning which are under the water. Okay, so over time with the rise of the sea level, the valleys have been drowned, have gone under the water, and as a result of that estuaries are formed, and this can be seen in the western coast. Okay, because of this particular feature of the western coastal plain, this western coastal area has lot of land for fishing. So there are fishing villages, and there are also areas where coconut, palms and spices are grown and found in plenty. Okay. Now the western coast also has many ancient ports. These ports, the existing ports have not been existing until recently. Okay. They had been existing, and these areas had been important for different important ports that have been situated there from the ancient times. Okay. Some of the famous ones are Mumbai and Marmagao. Okay. Now, apart from estuaries, apart from the ports which are in this part of the coast, which is the western coastal plain, there are also lagoons in this area. Now, lagoons are salt water lakes. They are also another unique feature which can be found in the western coastal plain areas, and these lagoons are basically salt water lakes. Apart from that, there are also spits and sandbars in this area. And because of these features, these areas have tea, coffee and rubber plantations. Okay. Now that was western coastal plain. Now when we look at the eastern coastal plains, then we have Coromandel coast. Okay, the coast here is called Coromandel coast, but this Coromandel coast is the coast which lies along the Andhra Pradesh and Tamil Nadu area. Okay, and in the eastern coastal plain, there are two important rivers, which are Narmada and Kaveri rivers. Now, of these, the Kaveri river is extremely important. In fact, it is considered sacred, meaning holy, just like Ganges in the northern plains. And Kaveri river is also called Dakshina Ganga. That means Ganga of the south. Okay, Dakshina means south. So, Ganga of the south is also the name given to Kaveri river because it is considered one of the sacred rivers in the south. Okay, there are many holy places and temples which are located along these rivers. Now, Kaveri river, apart from being sacred, apart from being holy, apart from having lot of temples along it, it also serves as a very important source of water for the states lying near to it. Okay, so as a result of that, water and hydroelectric supply is provided to the state of Karnataka, and that is very essential for the irrigation there, for the cultivation of crops there. Okay, when the farmers grow crops, water is very important, and for that irrigation is important, and that irrigation is not possible without proper water channels, without proper hydroelectric supply produced by the state or the governments and the officials concerned or responsible for the better or for the for aiding the people, okay, for helping the people. So that was the coastal plains. Now the last section of this feature that we have been looking at is the islands. Okay, so we looked at the mountains, we looked at the plains, we looked at the desert, we looked at the Deccan, the plateau, the peninsula area. We looked at the coastal plains. Now the final one is the islands. India also has islands. Okay, if you remember, at the beginning of this lesson, I told you the difference between islands and peninsula. Peninsula is a mass of land or a land mass or a body of land which is surrounded by water on three sides. Okay, but islands are those landmass where the water surrounds on all sides. That is the difference between peninsula and an island. Okay, so India has many such land masses which are surrounded by water on all of its sides. That is why they are called islands. And they are found on either side of its peninsular region. Okay, and on either side of the peninsular region, we know we have Bay of Bengal in the east and Arabian Sea in the west. Now the islands are located in both of these water bodies. Okay. In the east, which is Bay of Bengal, we have Andaman and Nicobar Islands. Now this Andaman and Nicobar Islands are group of islands. That's why we call it islands, plural, not island, okay, because it is a group of islands, okay. There are more than 300 islands in Andaman and Nicobar Islands, and out of that 300 islands, 265 is uninhabited, meaning in 265 islands people do not live. People cannot live there. Okay, so only about 35 islands are inhabited by people. Okay, now Andaman and Nicobar Islands are also divided into many portions or parts. They are divided into Great Andamans and Little Andamans. Okay, now the Great Andamans and Little Andamans have about 204 islands. Okay. The Nicobar Islands have 19 islands, and out of that 19 islands, 7 are uninhabited. So as you can see, just because they are islands and part of India does not mean all of those islands have people living in them. Some of them don't have people living in them. Okay, only few of those islands have people living in them. Now let us look at the islands found in the Arabian Sea, and that island is called Lakshadweep. Okay. Now the Andaman and Nicobar Islands have islands which are larger than those in Lakshadweep. Okay. And these islands in Andaman and Nicobar Islands are actually those hill areas, hill regions which have been submerged or went under the water. Okay, once upon a time they were proper hills, but over time they have been submerging, okay, under the water, and because of that they formed the present day islands. Some of these islands also have volcanic origins, meaning some of them also have had been a volcanic eruption, a volcano, or active or dormant volcanoes, okay, where lavas used to erupt at some point, but today they are not. Now, who lives in Andaman and Nicobar Islands? Who are the residents? Who inhabits the Andaman and Nicobar Islands? They are migrant Indians. Migrant means people who move from one country to another one, to one place to another place to live there. Okay, so they move to settle, to live. Okay, so the people who are inhabitants who live in Andaman and Nicobar Islands are migrant Indians, Bangladeshis, Sri Lankans and Karens from Myanmar. Okay, so all the peoples from the countries around Andaman and Nicobar Islands have migrated to the islands and lived there. Okay, the capital of Andaman and Nicobar Islands is called Port Blair, a very important city. Okay, and it is situated in the southeast of South Andaman Island. Okay, and the location of it is set in such a manner that from there you can go to all parts of the rest of the islands. Okay, you don't have to go, or it is not situated in an inconvenient position where if you have to go from Port Blair to another part of the island, then you have to go through a lot of difficulties. The position is such that it is easier to travel across to various different islands. Now that was Andaman and Nicobar Islands, which are located in the Bay of Bengal in the eastern side of the peninsular part of our country. Now when we come to the western side, when we look at the Arabian Sea, then we find Lakshadweep Islands. Just like the Andaman Nicobar Islands, Lakshadweep Islands are also group of islands. Okay, it is not just one island, but it is a group of islands, and it has about 100,000 islands there, which form Lakshadweep Islands. Okay, Lakshadweep Islands is the smallest union territory in India. India has many union territories, and Lakshadweep among them is the smallest. Okay. Now in Lakshadweep, the southernmost island of it has 36 exquisite coral islands. Okay, the southern part of it is formed by coral islands, and Lakshadweep, or this part, the southernmost part of the island, is very close to Maldives, another country. Okay, and this coral islands lying towards the southernmost part of the island used to be called Lakadives. Okay, but now no longer called it. In Lakadives, there are many untouched beaches, meaning it is not open for people to go and visit. It is a closed beaches. Okay, it is not open for tourists, and hence it is not touched by the tourists and other people. Okay, and it has lot of green coconut groves. Now Lakshadweep, since we already know that the southernmost part of it is formed by coral islands. So the Lakshadweep Islands, the group of Lakshadweep Islands, are formed by coral deposits. Okay, and these coral deposits are called atolls. And the atoll, the name is in English, but in Malayalam it is called atollu. Okay, so the name atoll is derived from the Malayalam word atollu. Okay, from atollu, the name has been given as atolls to the coral deposits which form the Lakshadweep Islands. Now Lakshadweep Islands has the richest diversity of coral varieties. There are different kinds of coral varieties which can be found in the Lakshadweep group of islands, and it also has extremely colorful reef fishes. Okay, so in those coral islands you see colorful reef fishes which thrive in that area, which are unique species that are thriving in that area. Okay, so with this we have come to the end of this chapter, and as we conclude, we have learned through this chapter about the India's position in the world, the India's physical features, important physical features. Okay, and we saw that how each feature is unique and different from the other. So we looked at the mountains, the Himalayas in the north. To its south we saw the plains, how fertile it was and how vast it is. And then we came towards the northwest where we saw the Thar desert, the hot and dry area, right, which receives very scanty rainfall. And then we came south and we saw the Deccan or the Peninsula Plateau, right, where there are smaller hills and flat topped landscapes. And after that we looked at the coastal plains which borders the peninsular part of the country. Okay, and then we saw how these have important ports, how these have different unique features, right, and how these have also hill ranges which have different local names. And lastly we also looked at islands, another unique physical feature of our country, and we saw that how they have unique coral varieties, how they are unique in their own way. Okay, so these are the basic foundational understanding that we get from this chapter about our country. Okay,